Okay, so this is the last chapter of the True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle. This chapter takes place after Captain Jaggery has just died, and Zachariah has told the crew, "Hey, Charlotte should be the captain of the ship now." And so it's all about when she arrives to America, what happens next. Now, at the end, I have a couple of questions for you to think about because some people argue that this would be a good stopping point for the book. This was the chapter 21 was the last should be the last chapter that Jaggery dies, Charlotte becomes captain of the ship, and that's it, the end. Some people say that it fits in really well with the rest of the story, and you need that closure of this last chapter. So I'm going to read it to you. You're going to hear a couple of different characters that are new. You're going to meet Charlotte's mom, her dad, her sister, and her brother, and then a couple of their servants and maids at the in America. All right, so here we go. Captain in name, perhaps, but not in practice. I was too aware of all I had yet to learn for that. Besides, as Zachariah would acknowledge later, the fact that I was the daughter of an officer in the company that owned the Seahawk was no small factor in my formal elevation. I would preserve the niceties. But though I was entered into the log as captain, I wrote it there myself, it was Zachariah who took true command. I insisted, and no one objected. The crew chose their mates, Fisk and Barlow, and assembled themselves into two watches and managed well enough. Johnson was more than happy to return to the forecastle. So Charlotte is kind of the captain of the ship. Like she has the title, but really Zachariah is the one who's running things. Regarding Captain Jaggery, the log read simply, at the crew's urging, I wrote that our noble captain had kept his post at the wheel during the hurricane, only to be swept away in the storm's final hour. Mr. Hollybrass was afforded the same heroic death. I've been skeptical of accounts of deceased heroes ever since. Though Fisk and Barlow insisted I move into the captain's quarters, I continued to work watch and watch as before. In between, I wrote furiously in my journal, wishing to set down everything. It was as if only by reliving the events in my own words could I believe what had happened. Within 24 hours of Captain Jaggery's death, Morgan threw the line, pulled up a plug of black sand, tasted of it, and announced, "Block Island." Gross, he tasted the sand? We would reach Providence, assuming the wind held, in no more than 48 hours. Indeed, 12 hours later, the mainland was sighted. A thin, undulating ribbon of green-gray between sea and sky. There was much rejoicing among the crew about this and their grand expectations once they were ashore. As for me, I found myself suddenly plunged into to me, inexplicable melancholia. Melancholia means she's really bummed. She's getting to America and she's really bummed. Think about why do you think she'd be so sad? What What ails our Captain Doyle? Zachariah asked, using the term he had taken to teasing me with. He discovered me up at the forepeak, morosely watching the sea and the coast toward which we were drawing ever closer. I shook my head. It's not a many, alas, he reminded me, who boards a ship as passenger and eases into port as captain. Zachariah, I said, what shall become of me? Why, now I shouldn't worry. You've told me your family is wealthy. A good life awaits you. And Charlotte, you've gained the firm friendship of many a Jack here, not to speak of memories the young rarely have. It has been a voyage to remember. Where's your home? I asked suddenly. The east coast of Africa. Were you ever a slave? Not I, he said proudly. And did you want to become a sailor? That question he didn't answer right away. But when he did, he spoke in a less jovial tone. I ran away from home, he said. Why? I was young. The world was big. My home was small. Did you ever go back? He shook his head. Never longed to? Oh, yes, often. But I didn't know if I would be welcome, or what I would find. Do you remember, Charlotte, what I first told you when you came aboard, that you, a girl, and I, an old black man, were unique in the sea? Yes. The greater fact is, he said, I am unique everywhere. And I? Who can say now, he answered. I can only tell you this, Charlotte. A sailor chooses the wind that takes the ship from a safe port. Ah, yes. But once you're aboard, as you have seen, winds have a mind of their own. Be careful, Charlotte, of the wind you choose. Well, that's kind of deep if you think about it. So Zechariah is saying, when you get on a ship, you can choose which direction you're going to take, but you can't really control the wind. You can't say, okay, wind, let's go. Okay? It just kind of takes its course. So think about what that would mean to your own life. Okay? So if you apply this to your own life, you might think about, you can say what you want to do in life, but really things are going to happen, and you can't always control what happens. All you can do is just continue on your course as best you can and kind of take things in stride and figure out how you're going to handle that. Zechariah, I asked, won't anyone in Providence ask what happened? The thing we'll do, he replied, is remind the owners that we managed to bring the Seahawk into port with their cargo intact. True, we lost the captain and the first mate, but they died, don't you see, doing their duty. Won't Keach talk? Too grateful that we spared his life. Besides, Jaggery had some hold on him, blackmail, so Keach is free of that too. Cranach? Never on board, I promise you, Charlotte, he concluded. The owners will be sorrowful for all the loss, but their tears won't be water enough to float a hat. I mean, they're going to be sad, but, what's important to these businessmen is they get their money. Almost 2 months after we left Liverpool, we entered Narragansett Bay and slowly beat our way up to Providence. And on the morning of August 17th, 1832, we warped into the India docks. When I realized that we were going to dock, I went to my cabin and excitedly dressed myself in the clothes I had kept for the occasion. Bonnet over my mangled hair, full if somewhat ragged skirts, shoes rather less than attacked, gloves more gray than white. To my surprise, I felt so much pinched and confined I found it difficult to breathe. I glanced at my trunk where I had secreted my sailor's garb as a tattered memento. For a moment I considered changing back to that, but quickly reminded myself that it must, from then on, remain a memento. Now, I want you to think about this idea, because we talked about white gloves when we first started reading the book, and that the white gloves represented that you don't have to get your hands dirty. These wealthy people, they pay people to do all the dirty work for them. And you've got Charlotte here, and she's going back to her old life, and she puts on these gloves. But they're not white anymore. They're gray, and they're a little dirty. So what do you think that tells us about Charlotte? She's got these dirty white gloves now. For me, it kind of talks about she's got these dirty white gloves, so she's not quite in the same place she was when she began. She's not afraid to get her hands dirty anymore. At least that's just my interpretation of it. As the ropes secured us, I looked upon the dock and with a beating heart saw my family among the waiting throng. There were my father and mother, brother and sister, all searching up for me. They were, as I remembered them, prim, overdressed despite the dreadful summer heat. My mother was in a full skirt the color of dark green, with a maroon shawl about her shoulders and a bonnet covering most of her severely parted hair. My father, the very image of a man of property, was frock-coated, vested, top-hatted with mutton chops a gray bristle. My brother and sister were but little miniatures of them. They're so fancy. Truly, I was glad to see them, and yet I found that I struggled to hold back tears. Farewells to the crew were all too brief, carefully restrained. The real goodbyes had been spoken the night before. Tears from Barlow, a gruff hug from Fisk, kisses to my cheeks from Ewing. You're my mermaid now, lass, he whispered, an offer with a sly grin of a splicing knife from Grimes. Refused. A round of rum toasted by Foley, topped off with 3 huzzahs from all. Then came the final midnight watch with Zachariah, during which time he held my hand and I, unable to speak, struggled to keep my tumbling emotions within. Now I marched down the gangway into the careful embrace of my parents. Even my brother Albert and sister Evelina offered little more than sigh-like kisses that barely breathed upon my face. We settled into the family carriage. Why is Charlotte's dress so tattered? Evelina asked. It was a difficult voyage, dearest, my mother answered for me. And her gloves are so dirty, Albert chimed in. Albert, Papa reproved him. But then after we'd gone on a pace in silence, my mother said, Charlotte, your face is so very brown. The sun was hot, Mama. I would have thought you'd stay in your cabin, she chided, reading edifying tracts. Only the clip-clop of the horses could be heard. I looked past the brim of my bonnet. I found my father's eyes hard upon me as if plumbing secrets. I cast down my eyes. A difficult voyage, my dear, he asked at last. You were dismasted. There was a terrible storm, Papa, I said, appealing to him with my eyes. Even Fisk, the sailors, called it one of the worst they'd ever experienced. We lost the captain and the first mate. God in his mercy, I heard Mama whisper. Well, yes, I'm sure, my father offered. But one must be careful about the words we choose, Charlotte. It's well known that sailors have an unhealthy tendency toward exaggeration. I look forward to reading a more sober account in your journal. You did keep it as you were bidden, did you not? Yes, Papa. My heart sank. I'd completely forgotten. He would want to see what I'd written. I'm greatly desirous of reading it. He wagged a finger at me playfully. But mind, I shall be on the lookout for spelling mistakes. Then, thank heavens, Albert and Evelina insisted upon telling me about our fine house on Benevolent Street. It was bigger than I remembered. Great columns graced the doorway. Huge draped windows like owl eyes faced the street. Its full 2 stories put me in mind of an English fortress. Then we were safely inside, standing in the large foyer before the grand stairway. It seemed immense to me. The dark, cut off after so many days from sun and air. With my father looking on, Mama gently removed my bonnet. When she saw my mangled hair, she gasped. Charlotte, she whispered, what happened? Lice, I heard myself saying, one of the few explanations I'd rehearsed. She gasped again, and before I could restrain her, took up my hands in pity. Poor girl, she whispered, such awfulness. Even as she stood there holding my hands, a strange look passed across her face. Slowly she turned my hands over, gazed at the palms, then touched them with her fingertips. And your hands, she asked in horror, they are so hard. I had to do my own washing, Mama. Dear Charlotte, I am so frightfully sorry. Mother, Papa suddenly said, perhaps we should move on to our breakfast together. He offered me his arm. I took it gratefully. We walked into the dining room. The table was laid with white cloth, fine china plate, and silver. Breaking from Father, I started to sit. Let your mother sit first, my dear, I heard him murmur. As we began to eat, my father said, Am I to understand, Charlotte, as the shipping agent informed me, that those other families, the ones who had promised to be with you during the voyage, never fulfilled their pledge? No, Papa, I answered. They never came to the ship. How dreadfully lonely for you, my mother said, shaking her head sadly. 2 months with no one to talk to? Evelina exclaimed. Of course I talked, silly. But to whom? Albert asked in puzzlement. The men, the sailors. The men, Charlotte, my mother said with a frown. Well, you see... You mean the captain, do you not, Charlotte? My father suggested. Oh, no, not just him, Papa. You see, a ship is so small. Suddenly my father interjected. We seem to be lacking butter. I'll get it, I said, pushing back my chair. Charlotte, sit, my father barked. He turned to the maid, who was waiting nearby. Mary, butter. Why, he's so nice about that. No, Mary, please get the butter. No, Mary, butter, now. Rude. The maid curtsied and went out. When I turned back around, I found my sister staring at me. What is it? I asked. I just thought of what you look like, Evelina said. What? She wrinkled her nose. An Indian. Albert laughed. Children, my father cried. With much effort, Albert and Evelina sat still. Charlotte, I heard my mother ask, how did you pass your time? Mama, you have no idea how much work there is on... My father abruptly took out his watch. It's much later than I thought, he said. Evelina and Albert have their lesson in the nursery. Miss Van Rogoff, their tutor, will be waiting. Children! Now struggling to suppress their giggles, Albert and Evelina rose from their seats. You may go now, my father said to them. Once they had gone, the room became very quiet. My mother was looking at me as if I were a stranger. My father's gaze was his most severe. The sailors were very kind to me, I offered. I could hardly be expected. You must be fatigued, he cut in. I think some rest would do you some good. I'm very awake, Papa. I mean, I've grown used to very little sleep and... Charlotte, he insisted, you are tired and wish to go to your room. So he's saying, Charlotte, you are tired, meaning like you need to go to bed now. But, Charlotte, you mustn't contradict your father, my mother whispered. I rose from my seat. I don't know where my room is, I said. Mary, my father called. Ask Bridget to come in. Mary appeared in a moment with another maid, a girl not very much older than I. Bridget, my father said, take Miss Charlotte to her room. Help her with her bathing and change of clothes. Yes, sir. Bridget led the way. My room was on the right side of the house on the second floor. Its windows faced the rear garden where a trellis of roses were in radiant bloom. I stood at the windows gazing down on the earth and flowers and told myself again and again, this is home, this is home. I heard a sound behind me. A man, yet another servant, I assumed, brought in my trunk and opened it. Then he left. I went back to staring out the window. If you please, miss, I heard Bridget say, your father said I was to bathe you and dress you. Bridget, my name is not Miss, it's Charlotte. I'll not be wanting to take the liberty, miss. I turned to face her. Even if I want you to? I don't think the master would approve, miss. But if I asked you, not wishing to be impertinent, miss, Bridget said in a barely audible voice, but it's master who pays my wages. I looked into her eyes. Bridget looked down. I felt a pain gather about my heart. There was a soft knock on the door. Shall I answer it, miss? Bridget whispered. Yes, please, I said with great weariness. Bridget opened the door to the other maid, Mary. Mary entered and curtsied. Miss, she said to me, master asks that Bridget take and destroy all your old clothing, miss. He also requests that I bring your journal down to him, miss. Wow, that's a lot of miss in one sentence. I looked at the two of them, the timidity of their postures, the unwillingness to engage me with their eyes. Mary, I said, that is your name, isn't it? Yes, miss. Would you call me Charlotte if I asked you to? Be my friend? Mary stole a nervous glance at Bridget. Would you? I shouldn't think so, miss. But why? I pleaded. Master wouldn't have it, miss. I should be dismissed. I could not reply. Then after a moment Mary said, I'll be happy to take the journal down now, miss. Shall I fetch it, miss? Bridget asked me. I went to the trunk, found the book, and gave it to Mary. She curtsied without another word, and still avoiding my look, stepped soundlessly from the room, shutting the door behind her. I went back to the window. Shall I assume that all the clothes in the trunk, miss, are old? Bridget asked finally. What will happen to them? Give them to the poor, I should think, miss. Mistress is very kind that way. There's one thing I must preserve, I had the wits to tell her. Hurriedly I removed my sailor's clothing. Are those to be kept, miss? Bridget asked in puzzlement. I wish to show them to my parents, I lied. Very good, miss. My trunk was unpacked. I bathed. How strange that was. My filth fairly floated off. I dressed, helped by, or rather interfered with, despite my protestations, by Bridget. But instead of going downstairs, I dismissed her, then sat on my bed, marveling at its softness. In truth, I was trying to compose myself. I was afraid to go downstairs. A call I knew would come soon enough, but as I sat there, a memory came of my first moments upon the Seahawk. How alone I felt then. How alone I was now. Oh, Zachariah, I whispered to myself, where are you? Why don't you come for me? It was my father's call that came, but not before 2 hours had passed. Mary returned with a request that I go directly to the parlor. With a madly beating heart, I started down the broad, carpeted stairs, my hand caressing the highly polished balustrade. Before the massive doors to the room, I paused and drew breath. Then I knocked. "Come in," I heard my father say. I entered. My mother was seated in a chair. My father was by her side, standing with his legs slightly apart, as if bracing himself. A hand gripped one of his jacket lapels. So he's like holding on his jacket like this. The other hand rested protectively on Mama's shoulder. She stared down at the carpet. "Charlotte," my father said, "please shut the door behind you." I did so. "Now come stand before us." "Yes, Papa." I advanced to the place indicated by my father's pointed finger. Only then did I notice that the room, even for an August midday, was uncommonly warm. I glanced toward the fireplace and was startled to see a blaze there. It took me another moment to realize that my journal was being consumed by flames. I made a move toward it. "Stop!" my father cried. "Let it burn." "But to ash!" I turned to them in disbelief. "Charlotte," my father began, "I have read your journal carefully. I have read some of it, not all, to your mother. I could say any number of things, but in fact will say only a few. When I have done, we shall not speak of any of this again. Is that understood?" "But is it understood, Charlotte?" "Yes, Papa." "When I sent you to the Barrington School for Better Girls, I had been, I believed, reliably informed that it would provide you with an education consistent with your station in life, to say nothing of your expectations and ours for you. I was deceived. Somehow your teachers there filled your mind with the unfortunate capacity to invent the most outlandish, not to say unnatural, tales." Unnatural? Who says things like that? "Papa!" I tried to cut it. "Silence!" he roared. I closed my mouth. "What you have written is rubbish of the worst taste. Stuff for penny dreadfuls, beneath contempt. Justice, Charlotte, is poorly served when you speak ill of your betters, such as poor Captain Jaggery. More to the point, Charlotte, your spelling is an absolute disgrace. Never have I seen such an abomination. And the grammar, it is beyond belief. An American tutor, miss, shall instill a little order in your mind. But the spelling, Charlotte, the spelling." "Papa." "That is all we have to say on the subject, Charlotte, all we shall ever say. You may return to your room, and you will wait there until you are summoned again." I turned to go. "Charlotte!" I stopped, but did not turn. "You are forbidden to talk about your voyage to your brother and sister." My wait to be called was a long one. The simple truth is, I was not allowed to leave my room. All meals were brought by Mary on a tray. I was permitted no callers, not even Albert or Evelina. "She's seriously ill," people were told. No matter how much I tried, Bridget, the one person I saw with any regularity, would not yield to my efforts of friendship. From my mother I received little comfort, but many tears. From my father, a vast quantity of books that he deemed suitable for my reclamation. Not a word, not a question to console me. But I did not read. Instead, I used the books, the blank pages, the margins, even the mostly empty title pages, to set down secretly what had happened during the voyage. So she's rewriting her journal. It was my way of fixing all the details in my mind forever. 1 week had passed in this fashion when I thought to ask Bridget for a newspaper. "I'll have to request it of master," she replied. "Bridget," I told her, "for every day you bring a newspaper without informing my father, I shall give you a gift." Bridget gazed at me. After a momentary search of my vanity table, I selected a pearl-headed hairpin and held it up. "Like this," I said. She complied with my request. Within a week I found what I was searching for under the listings of departures for Europe. Brig Seahawk, to sail on September the 9th by the morning's tide. Captain Roderick Fisk, master. For the next few days I made such a show of concentrating hard on my books that I was finally permitted to have my evening meals with the family downstairs. On September the 8th, surely one of the longest days I can remember, I informed everyone at table that I wished to be excused to continue the reading that was so occupying me. "What are you studying, my dear?" my mother asked nervously. "Dr. Dillard's essay on patience, Mamma." "How very gratifying," she said. Later that evening, I was informed that my father wished me to come to his study. I went down and knocked on his door. "Enter," he called. He was sitting in his reading chair, an open book before him. He looked up, closed his book, and drew me forward with a gentle gesture of his hand. "You are making progress, Charlotte," he said. "I wish to commend you. I do." "Thank you, Papa." "You are young, Charlotte," he told me. "The young are capable of absorbing many shocks and still maintaining an—" He searched for the proper words. "An orderly life?" I offered. He smiled, the first smile I had seen in a long while. "Yes, exactly, Charlotte, orderly. You give me such hope. You and I now understand each other perfectly. Good night, my dear girl. Good night." He took up his book again. "Good night, Papa." I bathed. I let Bridget supervise my going to bed. By 2 o'clock in the morning, all was perfectly still. I slipped out of bed and from the bottom drawer of my bureau took from beneath my paper-layered frocks the sailor's clothes that Zachariah had made me. I changed into them. I opened the window to my room. It was child's play for me to climb down the trellis. I almost laughed. Within half an hour I was on the India docks, standing before the Seahawk, dark except for a lantern fore and aft. A new mainmast had been stepped. As I watched from the shadow of some bales of goods, I saw someone on watch pacing the quarterdeck. At one point he proceeded to the bell and rang out the time. 4 bells. Ding, 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 ding. Each clang sent shivers up and down my spine. Boldly now I walked up the gangplank. "Who is that?" came a challenge. I said nothing. "Who is that?" came the demand again. Now I was certain of the voice. "Zachariah," I called, my voice choked. "Charlotte!" "I've decided to come home." By morning's tide and a southwest wind, the Seahawk sailed away. As it did, I was clinging to the topgallant spar below a billowing royal yard. Something Zacharias had told me filled my mind and excited my heart. "A sailor," he said, "chooses the wind that takes the ship from safe port. But winds have a mind of their own." Thus ending The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle by Avi. Now, you've heard the last chapter. Okay, there's a lot in there. You definitely see, hopefully you saw the similarities between her dad and Jaggery, especially like the talk of orderly. He even calls her actions unnatural. And so the question is, why did she leave her family? She was trying so hard to get home, and she leaves and joins the ship, and I'm assuming is just going to live with the crew now. Why did she make that decision? And the bigger question is what I said at the beginning of this recording. So some people think that the book would have been better if they didn't have this last chapter, because you had some closure and you had Charlotte becoming the captain. This chapter definitely feels a little different, but do you think this chapter is necessary to help round out the story? So just think about that. I hope you enjoyed this recording. It's a great book. If you've got a copy of the book, you might check out, there's a cool diagram of the ship on the back of the book, and then also an explanation of how the bells work on the ship. So that's all I've got. Until next time, be awesome.